Hey guys, I'm Jose and welcome to this new tutorial on Unity scripting. Right, so I'm gonna just continue where I left off in the previous one. I'm gonna see that this is a script that we were working on. It's basically a script that if we run this, we have this cube moving around, right? But let's try to just add a little bit to that. We're gonna create a variable here that is gonna be called my color. And this is going to be from the type color, right? And we're going to say the autocorrection, there we go, color, and it's color 1,0,0,1, right? So let's use this color in a function to change the color of the material of this box, right? So let's see if this works, right? And we're gonna break it down and try to understand it, right? So you see that now the box is red, right? Right, so let's explain a little bit what's going on here. We've created a variable that it's a type color, right? So color is a type, and then the way we describe a color is like we use RGB channels, right? So red, green, blue, but these colors go from 0 to 1, right? If you're familiar with processing or something like that, where you work with 0255 as a range or the domain of the color, right? Here it's from 0 to 1, and this last one is the alpha channel. So we could define something like green, right? So RG and that should be a green cube, right? So that's very straightforward. We can actually work with the color of the object, right? But this color, we're changing it dynamically inside the update, right? So we could technically make the color of the cube change depending on some information, right? So let's keep that red guy, the red cube, and make this color dependent on something, right? So let's say we want to calculate the distance from the cube to our first person, like what is the distance that the cube is having to our kind of controller, right? So that's a bit more tricky, right? So the thing what we're going to do here is just do a variable that we're going to say this is going to be the player. That's the name of the variable, and it's going to be from the type transform, right? I think this should be capitalized. Yeah, that seems more like it. So let's save this, and now let's go to our cube, and you see that we have this variable player, and it's kind of indicating that it requires a transform, right? But it has no information, right? So basically the cool thing about Unity is that you could say, well, I have this first person controller, I want to just drag it and place it here, right? And in a way it will detect the transform node of this piece of geometry and use that, and you see that we have this icon for the transform. So it will detect the transform node from this piece of geometry, and that will be the transform node from the other object, right? So in a way, this transform player now, it's associated to the information of the first person controller because we actually explicitly said so, right? We did that. So now basically we can do some calculations. We're gonna do it here. Some calculations to actually get the distance value, right? So we're gonna get a variable called distance or dist. That is going to be a type float, and it's going to be what we need to just do a vector calculation, right? Because vectors allow us to kind of calculate the distance, and we're going to do vector3 dot distance, and we are going to just provide our own let's say, because this script is kind of living inside the cube, right? We could say something like this dot transform dot position, right? And that's the position of the cube, right? This is a keyword for saying this object, right? And this object has a transform node, and that transform, inside the transform, as we've seen, you have position, rotation, and scale, right? So you're just working with that one. And now we need to provide the second vector, right? So we have one vector that it's the point that we're using as the first position, and then the second one would be the one from the player. I need to do something about that, but anyway. So player dot, because player is already a transform, we don't need to type transform, right? So we could say player dot position, and that should be it, right? Let's see if this is working. So we have an error, and it's saying position is not a member of the transform. Okay, that's my just, we're gonna do position. Let's check, because this actually should help us, right? So what if we say position? Let's try it now. Right, so you see that now it works, but nothing's happening, right? So we should be able to kind of print distance. So what happens if we just want to see at least the distance, right? Somewhere. I'm gonna save every time that I'm running the script. I'm just saving, like pressing Ctrl S quickly to save the script before even running it. So just, and you see that now if I click in this line here, I have this kind of panel coming out, and basically the cube, where's the cube? Oh, there we go, the cube is over there, and we are printing out here the distance from me to the cube, and that's the value, right? So we're printing that every frame. It's going quite fast, and because the cube is moving away, the distance keeps on increasing, right? So maybe we want to just do this cube first of all a little bit slower again, so maybe 0.01. And let's do something like now determine its color. We could even say 0.001, so it's just extremely slow, so it's almost standing still. And what we're gonna do now is just in a way control the color with the distance, right? So what we're gonna do is just the distance that we were working on before. We were working with units very small, like when it was really far away it was 100 or so. So okay, so we're gonna say variable mapped distance. It's gonna be distance divided by 100, right? And this is what we're gonna just use as the red channel, right? So let's see if this scaling that we're doing, like bringing it extremely small, would work. And we can just see. So the cube is black, but if we get closer, it should change color. Let's see what distance we're working with. We're working with a distance of 4 divided by 100. We're using 0.04, so maybe that's too much, right? So let's divide it by 10 and see if this would work now. Right, so it's working, but it's working the other way around, right? So if we are further away, the distance is big, right? This value increases, it's red, it's shiny, and then if we keep on getting closer, the cube is getting darker, right? You see that we are kind of calculating the distance. You can see the distance here, right? And if I walk too much, I will just fall. So pretty cool. Now we can actually establish some communication between this first-person controller and the cube. The other thing that we're going to see, it's in this tutorial, the second one is what is a prefab, because this is a very, very, very powerful feature, right? So I could just hide my script. And what I'm going to do here is a folder called a prefab folder, right? And in here I'm going to create a prefab, right? And what is a prefab? I'm going to call this my color box, right? So a prefab is something that we let's say, like this cube has a script on it, and maybe we want to just create several copies of this guy, like instances of this cube with the script associated to that. So what we could say is just basically make this cube a prefab, and then we can drag and position many of them in the screen, right? So right now, with the script that we have, we could say cube, drag it into prefab, and you see that this kind of white box will become blue when I drop it, right? So now with this prefab view, we can actually see our cube, and it has a behavior that it's the behavior of changing color, right? So we could actually even get rid of this cube here in the hierarchy, because we have our prefab now, and we can actually drag and drop in the scene as many cubes as we want, and they're all kind of clones of the same behavior with it, right? So that's, we are placing 5 of them, and the problem right now, I'm gonna just delete them first, is that we haven't really linked. You see that our player is empty, so we need to drag our first-person controller to, so I'm gonna place one in the scene, and I'm gonna drag my first-person controller to that one. If we don't do one in the scene, it won't really work. So now I can actually make copies of this one, right? So I'm gonna press Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V and place a few of these boxes around. Now we can actually see that these guys should, if we look at them, their color should be relative to the distance. So in each case, it's calculating the distance to the object, to me, let's say the player, and it's calculating, changing the color based on that, right? You can see that in that case it's pretty evident. It would be more evident if we keep on doing some copies, right? So I'm going to place some copies that are a bit further away, like that. So let's see now, and you can see that the guys that are further away are definitely brighter. Very dark if I'm close. It seems that everybody's very bright here. And obviously we can tune that kind of mapping of the cubes, but in a way it's working pretty well. So that's this tutorial. Prefabs, really powerful, and basically just you can create these behaviors and replicate the behavior to any objects in the scene. So I'll see you guys soon. That's it.